The Surviving Bisclavret, a tale from Duðael. The fleeing predator weaved between the massive trees as he dodged several crossbow bolts shot by local hunters. He made the mistake of stealing fat hens from their humble farm. He panted with the fresh taste of poultry on his breath while he outran his pursuers. 2 legs could never keep up while he was on all 4. He reached the marked bushes where he hid his clothes and stood on his hind legs. He slipped his right paw into one of the cloth socks and started to transform. It wasn't the same transition of cracked bones and screaming pain that affected other wolves. His transformation flowed perfect, painless, and elegant. The wolfman was a Bisclavret. Unlike the traditional werewolf, he didn't need any of Japine's moons to be full to turn to a beast. He only had to remove his clothes. After he put his shirt on his tanned torso, the young man peeked his head around a tree to make sure he was alone. The hair around his cheeks receded to show a cautious but confident grin. The last part of him to become a man was his eyes, so for a minute after the transformation, he enjoyed the Bisclavret's superior vision. The man, called Jackson in this form, could see the farmers still searching for the wolf under every stump and boulder. Even if they spotted him, werewolves became extinct in Japine a decade ago, so they wouldn't think he was a monster. "Oh, Raphael," he said to himself as he wiped blood and shame from his chin. "Forgive me for any transgression. The theft was necessary." As Jackson, he was pious. He followed the God of his ancestors and believed that he and his angels watched over him. His God remained one of the few things that Jackson had left after the hunters' genocide against werewolves. He managed to hide during the moonless night, but the hunter wiped out his pack before then. He walked the opposite direction from the searching farmers so that he wouldn't have to force himself to lie. Jackson was still hungry, but his stomach would fill enough after his conscience caught up with the transformation. He found a wide dirt road that ran east to west at the treeline of the woods. Going east would take him to the hallowed city, a death trap for Jackson, so he went west. This was his first time being so far north of the Echo Forest. Usually, he wouldn't leave his hometown Erdende, but there was someone he had to go after. Jackson smelled a storm on the horizon as he traveled the route to Sangui's village. He had justice on his mind, for himself and his family. The man that murdered them before his own eyes had been in Erdende earlier in the year. Jackson hunted in Bisclavret form when the murderer rode through, but the familiar scent soaked into the only inn where he stayed. He prayed to his God for guidance, and when the moonless night came, Jackson knew that he had to take action. The rain started to patter into the ground of the trail to Sanguis. Jackson scoffed because that meant that the murderer's scent would fade, but he came upon another way to track him. Deep prints of a horse or an elk impressed in the mud. A crack of thunder above told him to seek shelter, so Jackson ran back into the forest. He found a small mound with a dark cave that would keep him dry while waiting out the storm. A family of hobgoblins stood around a small fire that vented out the top of the mound. The smallest one, most likely the male, stood in front of the other 2 with a sharpened spear. "Are you a purist? You're not welcome here." He sounded like he had a mouthful of marbles to swallow. That, and the archaic Neander he spoke, made it hard for Jackson to understand. He tried to be submissive the only way he knew how, by laying down and rolling on his stomach. It worked because the hobgoblins fell over laughing one after another. "You're no purist," the male hobgoblin said. "No, my name is Jackson. I'm no threat to you, I just seek shelter from the storm," he said as he stood. "Well, if you mean no harm, come dry by the fire. Have you any food?" Jackson shook his head and couldn't stop his shoulder-length black hair from flying around like a dog. He walked up to the flames and waved at the other 2 cave dwellers, which were the male's mate and their child. "Perhaps you can repay our kindness with a story," the male said. "I am Duðael and this is Punia. Our child is named Felicix." "Well met," Jackson said with a genuine smile. "I'm afraid the only tale I can think of lately is a little depressing for your son." "Our child won't mind," Duðael corrected. "They've known trouble and turmoil since I gave them the purest conversation." Rage flashed in Jackson's eyes for a moment, but the hobgoblins figured the reflection of the fire played tricks in the shadows of the cave. "That's just it. My tale, my only tale, is about a purist. My whole family was killed by a single purist. We were a pack of 20 strong." "Your pack? Then you are a wolf," Punia said. "I am a Bisclavret, like my father before me," Jackson explained as his features were deepened by shadows. The mutation is 1 in 100,000, but we managed to both get it. The rest of our pack were at the mercy of the 3 moons. I'm sorry for your loss, Punia continued. We have also lost most of our family. The only way to remember them now is in tales. 13 years ago, when I was still a pup, a red-haired purist attacked our camp. She was the Reaper, one of the most formidable of their kind. Still, my father defended us. He shed his clothes and battled with the human. I've heard of the Reaper. She's been missing for a decade, Duðael said. That's because my father did a fair amount of damage to her. Things that our God would not approve of. Just when he lunged to kill her, my pack's murderer ran out of the woods. I did not see, because I hid in the main tent, but the purist screamed as he stuck a long sword in my father. The child Felicix watched Jackson with wonder as the Bisclavret hoped he wasn't giving the young hobgoblin nightmares. They all sat on the stone floor to get more comfortable as the lightning and thunder flashed and crashed above. The other werewolves couldn't turn as it was daytime. I should have tried harder to defend them, but... Jackson choked up and Punia put her oversized green hand on his shoulder. There was warmth and comfort at the only affection he had received in years. Instead of denying his feelings, Jackson let the tears flow like the rain. He had been alone for so long and kept his story inside, but Jackson knew that the strangers understood. The murderer butchered the men, women, and children of the pack. When he finally found me in the tent, I was astonished that he stood only a few years older than me. He was a child, and he slaughtered an entire pack of wolves. As I looked into the monster's eyes, I saw nothing staring back. He was possessed by rage. Hate and disgust flowed around him like electricity. Part of me remembers seeing streaks of cobalt lightning around him and his sword like ancient dark magic. How did you escape? Duðael asked. Well, Jackson laughed. It was actually another purist. A man with a trident entered the tent and embraced the murderer. He looked to me and told me to run as fast as I could. So, I ran to Erdende in the south and lived in the woods outside of the town for a decade. Only recently, I caught the scent of the murderer. The storm outside calmed to a light rain and Jackson figured he didn't have to trouble the family anymore. He walked to the entrance of the mound and picked up the bag that he set down. He smiled and started to walk away as the hobgoblins worried. Jackson, good luck, Duðael said as he put his hand on his heart. I'll be praying for you. Thank you. But, I'm not sure luck or prayers will help me serve justice to the hunter. He walked back to the dirt path and continued to follow the wide elk tracks. Even if Jackson couldn't hope to win, he had to confront the hunter. As dangerous as the purist boy had been back then, he had since become a force of extinction that needed to be stopped. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, or subscribe if you liked the video.